Hello, everybody. Welcome. I welcome you all. This is Muhittin Ataman. I am editor-in-chief of Inside Turkey Journal. As you all know, that our journal is one of the leading journals published in Turkey, mainly focusing on Turkish politics and the politics of the surrounding regions. However, we do cover the primary issues of international politics as well. Global issues such as great power, rivalry, migration, environmental security, and technology are also covered. So, and after the publication of each issue of our journal, we organize panels regarding the topic of our special issue. Since we cover climate change and migration in our latest issue of Inside Turkey, today we have a panel on this topic that is mainly focusing on climate change and its impact on migration. That is, our focus will be mainly migration. And our panel attempts to bring a fresh and useful perspective in understanding one of the biggest environmental challenges facing the world, especially its impact on migration, as I've said, which creates, unfortunately, many political, economic, social, and environmental problems. That is, it has huge impact. So we'll try to focus on its impact on migration only. We have 3 presentations, which will be presented by 4 distinguished speakers, all of which are among the contributors of our journal, Inside Turkey. Each presentation is expected to last for 15-20 minutes. Then we will have a Q&A session afterwards. After this short introductory remarks, I want to give the first floor to Mr. Irudaya Rajan from India, who is the founder chairman of the International Institute of Migration and Development based in India. I want to ask 2 questions to you, Mr. Irudaya. First, will nation states, particularly those with huge population and vast land such as India, be able to tackle the challenges posed by natural disasters? The second question will be, will they compromise their growth at the expense of investing in projects tackling with environmental and social results of the climate change? Now the floor is yours. Thank you very much for accepting and contributing to our panel.
Thank you so much for the editor-in-chief, Ataman, for inviting me to be part of this very interesting panel. I have seen all the panel members. And I would like to start by thanking the editor-in-chief for inviting us to write this particular paper, especially on the floods we had in Kerala. But I just want to start saying, I think Kerala is not like a country. It is a part of a state in India. India has many states, many territories, but Kerala is a small part of state with 33 million people. Now, Kerala, migration is very, very dynamic in Kerala's context. I don't think nobody can forget the role played by international migrants and internal migrants. I want to start with giving a brief background of Kerala itself, because Kerala is probably one of the states like Philippines or some countries like Moldova. This is basically a remittance-based economy. As of today, when I speak to you people, Kerala has close to 2.2 million Keralites currently living anywhere in the world. 2.2 million Keralites living anywhere in the world. This is based on the Kerala Migration Survey conducted by myself and K.C. Sakaria few years back. And this is the international migrant, 2.2. Then we got 1.1 million Keralites are living anywhere within the country. So at any point of time, we have close to 3 million Keralites who are supposed to be the labor force in Kerala. They are not here. They have either within India or they are anywhere globally. Now this creates what I call them a remittance-based economy. And in economic terms, the remittances are equivalent to 35% of the Kerala state income. Then you can imagine how much remittances plays an important role. In fact, that 3.3 million people who are currently away from Kerala, they support close to 12 million people in Kerala. One migrant support 4 people back at home. One migrant support 4 people back at home. So 1/3 of the Kerala population is directly benefited by migration. 1/3. And another 1/3 is indirectly benefited by migration. Airports, travel agents, housing boom. You know, you can talk anything happening in Kerala, there will be something on migration. Now, there is a huge gap of requirement of labor force in Kerala. One side, Kerala people are leaving. Other side, Kerala population is aging like many countries in Europe, like Italy. Kerala has close to 20% of the population is about 60 plus. So we need basically a huge demand for internal migrants. Huge demand. In fact, I call them replacement migration. We have 3.3 million Keralites are working anywhere outside Kerala. To replace them, we need people from other part of India to come here. So at any point of time, we have close to 3.3 million other state people are coming into Kerala. We call them interstate migrants, or we call them in-migrants to Kerala. Now, based on this background, I would like you to take back what happened to them during the floods in Kerala. I would like all of you to read this special issue of the Insight, Turkey Insight, because we have provided a long paper on that, but I'm going to give you some curiosity for you to even read those full articles. Now, 2018 Kerala had floods. According to many experts, Kerala had experienced similar level of floods 100 years back, 1918. During last 100 years, Kerala never had this type of massive floods, what we have seen in our own eyes in 2018. Massive floods, unimagined in the known history of Kerala. Now, when the flood came, there were internal migrants who are staying probably in a place where they are not like the local people. So they will be living in poor locality. They will be living in lowland areas, but they were moving to highland, and there was some type of indifference treatment by the local people, because when there is a scarcity of resources or the scarcity of place, like a school, like a place where people are moving for, at the time of flood, there was some discrimination reported in Kerala's context. I think it was good for all of us. We learned during the floods. But Kerala is a migrant-friendly state. If you look at it in a very, very different way, Kerala is a migrant-friendly state. Kerala has a lot of schemes for the interstate migrants who comes into Kerala. We have schools for the West Bengal migrants who can learn language. There's a language barrier when they come to Kerala, because Kerala's people speak Malayalam. Whereas the other state people, when they come, they speak their own language. Maybe Hindi, maybe Bengali, but then they come and pick up the Malayalam very easily. But still, when they speak, probably we know that they are not from Kerala itself. But Kerala government was very careful, because they know that it is not the migrants' needs, It is Kerala needs migrants. I think this is very important. That has taken note by the Kerala government. Kerala needs migrants from other states to replace the work or replace the economy, or the Kerala want to move forward in developing, in creating economic growth. It requires migrants from other states. So Kerala knows that. They have a lot of policies. I want to pick up 2-3 policies, little bit, and I'll stop there. One is housing. Kerala has a special program for housing. Kerala has a special program for education for children. And Kerala also has a special program for insurance. But I want to first link from there. Because we were treated internal migrants who were in Kerala differently during COVID, during floods. And we got lessons during COVID-19. Please remember, climate change, Kerala floods was a natural crisis, or the crisis created by natural disasters. But what we had in 2020 was a COVID-19, the same thing, but it is a health disasters. There was a lockdown throughout the world, and we had lockdown. Kerala was the first state to announce lockdown prior to the India's lockdown. And that time, Kerala did very well in managing internal migrants. In fact, I was one of the expert committee member, or what you call the high power committee, to advise the Kerala government and the chief minister. And we made it very clearly the migrant has to be born in many programs. And we were providing 400,000 migrants were given state, and they were given what is called the common kitchen food. They had no problem. In fact, Supreme Court told the Delhi government that please learn from Kerala how the Kerala treated internal migrants. I think what we learned from the climate change crisis during floods, I think it was very helpful, because very quickly we had the other health crisis called COVID-19. And this is something very, very important for us. And the second important point, before I stop my quick intervention, is that Kerala is an economy based on tourism, based on environment, based on many, many developments. All this requires internal migration. And if you compare what happened during the COVID-19 crisis compared to what happened in Kerala, what happened in India, for example, we had a huge migration crisis. Some of you might have seen TV studios, TV screens. There was a huge migration crisis in India, but there was no big crisis in Kerala. So we treated them well. We learned from the crisis of the floods. I would like to stop here, and I'll come back for any questions, comments, and queries at next stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Irudaya, for this insightful presentation. Now, I want to give the floor to our second presenter. We have 2 authors for one piece, for one article in our latest issue. So both authors, that is co-authors, they want to make this presentation and make a contribution to our panel. The question that I want to ask to Dr. Burak Güneş and Dr. Haydar Karaman are as follows. As they take this to their title of the article, can the United Nations be a base to create an adequate legal framework for migration and climate policy at the global level, naturally? The second will be, to what extent attempts by the United Nations to reduce the adverse effects of climate change and climate-induced problems could be panacea vis-à-vis the current formation of the United Nations Security Council and power struggle among the superpowers. Now I want to give the first floor to Burak Güneş. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for participation.
Thank you very much, Hocam. First and foremost, I would like to thank and express my deepest gratitude to those who organized this highly esteemed panel and invited my colleague Haydar and me as participants. Thank you again. As regards your questions, Hocam, actually we should divide our talk into two parts. So I think, if you permit, in the first place, my colleague Haydar will give an insight relating to climate change and migration by taking Haiti United Nations as a case. After his speech, I will touch upon the legal debates incorporated into this hot topic. Now, with your permission, Hocam, may I give the floor to Haydar? Thank you. And then I will take it back.
Haydar Hocam, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you. Dear Muhittin, Ataman, and esteemed speaker, before I start my speech, I would like to thank you for inviting us to this panel to talk about the climate change. I should also say a big thank to dedicated members of Inside Turkey who have organized this panel. I would like to answer your second question after my little speech. Then I'm planning to back to the answer the question. Actually, I work about security and immigration policy, and my colleague Burak works on international law. We would like to point out that this is a new topic that we are working on. During my speech, I will focus on climate-induced migration policy, and I will do my best to not exceed the time allotted to us. As it well known, the current global warming and the destruction of nature have also made a climate-related problem more diverse. The decision to migrate is frequently affected by several distinct variables. A wide range of environmental and climate factors could affect climate-based migration from sudden onset to slow onset process. Therefore, taking action and understanding slow onset climate migration brings with some of the key policy challenge. It is indeed difficult to separate climate-driven migration decision from other motivational factors unless they are sudden large-scale movement. In addition, people who appear to have migrated due to economic reasons are likely to migrate as a reflection of the climate change. Climate-related crisis also brings some conflict and security problem, because when the political instability and economic crisis and population movement that are already exist in some countries come together with the climate crisis, of course there is no direct link between them, but the current situation may be more severe and make the state more fragile. This situation even includes the risk of turning into conflict. Maybe in this point, the United Nations Security Council has a responsibility to solve this problem. But if I turn to my speech, according to International Displacement Monitoring Service, IDMC, pointed out that the natural disaster triggered 31 million new displacement in the world in 2020. According to this report, it showed that 3.5 million new people who were displaced by the cause of the drought and extreme heat. That's why maybe we can say that this shows why this issue is so important for us. But here is the point that this figure mostly focus on sudden onset disaster within the border of the country, not international figure. If we talk about the United Nations, we can point it out that the Task Force on Displacement of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, they put some recommendation on how to deal with the displacement and climate change impacts, which are also applicable to slow onset events. The workshop international mechanism mainly assists the states to build their national capacity in the context of immigration policies, law and strategies for the climate-induced migration. But if we explain if I try to answer the question, your second question, it is difficult to respond actually, because when we consider the superpowers power struggle, if the truth to be told, superpowers have a veto right in the United Nations Security Council, which makes them superior to other states. Superpowers' commitment to climate policy is important at this point due to United Nations Security Council formation. There is not legal cure unless a radical system change occurs. That's the reality. And it is reality as well. The system grants the privilege to defend superpowers their national interests. However, there should be depoliticization on this issue. And to be honest, in a short time, existing attempts will not change neither the policy of the great power nor the Security Council of the Council policy. However, in the long term, if we look at the long-term policy, climate change increases social problems in the world. So to speak, ignoring an event has boomerang effect. The problem which you ignore or throw away will eventually hit you. We can't escape this problem. The case of the Haiti and United States is an example of this. Thousands of immigrants may kick your border gate and may cause a problem at internal level. Therefore, also China opposed to the formal discussion on the United Nations Security Council. China seems to be have started to agree on the idea that great power, I mean superpower, should lead to eliminate change, mitigation, and adaptation to it at a global level. But the problem is that maybe the question in here we ask to everyone also to unite to superpower. Will superpower inspire the entire international society for the common good, or this superpower? How does this superpower obligate to consider the climate change policy? But the problem is that another issue is we have to look on the migration policy. It is critical to consider the internal displacement in accordance with urbanization, because who have lost their livelihood and economic opportunities will move to urban center in pursuit of better life. However, city center will also no longer be a livable place. In this point, maybe we can consider rather than superpowers. It might be example to the superpower. The Bangladeshi government policy on relocation of internal migrants to secondary cities rather than metropole should be considered at this point. It might be a good example to superpower. Maybe we can't change their policy, but we can put a good example to the table for all states. The planned policy will play a primary role in the future in making migration secure. Maybe one of the most important issues at this point, to making migration secure. We can give some example to the other states, also according to the Haiti case. Haiti is as everybody know, is one of the hotspots in the world about the climate change. The Caribbean region, particularly Haiti, is a combination of the sudden onset and slow onset issue and the gang warfare conflict, which often lead to migration decision in the region. But the problem is that if the superpower still ignore this condition and still ignore the undeveloped countries' problem about the climate change, they have another internal problem. I mean, not internal problem, but I try to explain it briefly. After the 2000 earthquake, thousands of the people migrate to the United States. But United States solved this problem, and these people were awarded temporary protection status, which allowed them to send the money to their home. without the fear of deportation. It might be a good example to an important contribution to the restoration of country in Haiti. Because Haiti, after the earthquake and climate issues, lost their maybe we can say that they have a problem about the food insecurity and food security of the million of people in the country state. But in this point, we can see some example about rather than a superpowers example. Brazil offered humanitarian visas to Haitian refugees. Peru also provided temporary visa to this kind of implementing such a project and practice could help prevent the problem that refugee will experience. Superpower and all states, states should care about the immigration integration effort. How they can do that? They can provide not support. They can provide the shop, or they can provide the housing. They not just only support them with some financial aid. If they change their policy on the migration, they change their migration policy, it might be a kind of a new concept can be developed. It can be a new concept if the policy change at the national level. But the problem is that in here, the current terminology is causing a problem, because legal challenge arises when we're developing a new migration policy. Because at the point of the climate refugee policy, a legal basis should be established by taking into account of the people, not account. It not should be account to superpower policy. And we have a problem as a legal base. There isn't as yet a single data set really applicable to climate migration. For that reason, the word of the migration could be utilized as an umbrella term to allude to forced and voluntary forms of movement. To discuss the international legal dimension of this issue, I would like to leave the floor to my esteemed colleague, Burak.
Thank you so much, Hocam. And Haydar, thank you for your presentation. Hocam, please let me briefly give an outline for my speech in the first place. There are three separate but interrelated issues: the status of refugees, the non-refoulement principle, and the human rights perspective. Before touching upon these concepts, I would like to remind the very characteristics of the international state system. It is widely assumed that the global state system is constructed upon sovereignty and equality of states, and the principle of non-intervention is one of the basic principles of this structure. Therefore, each state in the system tries to enhance and preserve their national interests. Moreover, as an extension of the system's feature, there is no higher authority dictating what is lawful or not. Thus, there is no hierarchy of norms in the international state system. That eventually results in that arbitrary rule selection is at the very heart of the system. Now, I would like to read what Marti Koskieniemny says about in this issue. According to Marti Koskieniemny, there are two ways of arguing about order and obligation in international affairs. One argument traces them down to justice, common interest, progress, nature of the world community, or other similar ideas. Commonly, they are anterior or superior to state behavior, will, or interest. They are taken as a given normative code that presides the state and effectively dictates how a state is allowed to behave, what it may be, and its legitimate interest. Another argument bases order and obligation on state behavior, will, or interest. It takes, given the existence of states, and attempts to construct a normative order based on the factual state behavior, will, and interest. Following Walter Ullmann, that Koskieniemny cited, Koskieniemny calls these periods as the descending and ascending patterns of justification. However, according to Koskemniemi, the result is an incoherent argument that constantly shifts between the opposing positions while remaining open to challenges from the opposite argument. This provides the dynamics for international legal argument. So, we get from here that states may benefit from both justifications, that is called ascending and descending, which are mutually exclusive and cancel each other out. But both ways are mutually acceptable at the same time. This provides an indeterminate doctrine of international law. Now, let's apply this to refugee issue. In the first place, who is a refugee? A refugee is a person who falls under the definition given by Refugee Convention of 1951. Suppose a state does not want to entitle a person as climate refugee. In that case, that state legitimizes its argument by applying ascending justification, as the National Court of New Zealand did against an application seeking to receive refugee status because of climate change. The New Zealand's High Court decision given by Judge Price, I would like to quote now. According to the judge, for the reasons apparent in previous sections of this judgment, a sociological refugee or person seeking to better his or her life by escaping the perceived result of climate change is not a person to whom Article 1A2 of the Refugee Convention applies. Article 1A of the Refugee Convention identifies a refugee as owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of, this is important, race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. No terms refer to climate change, and none of the states has interpreted this clause as bestowing that status to those forced to immigrate because of climate change. A very formalistic reading of the convention not to harm states' national interests. But in the second point, there can be a chance for preserving the rights of immigrants if we apply the non-refoulement principle. If these people are not counted under the refugee status, is there a way to protect their rights by not sending them back to their home country? Yes, there is. Recently, the UN Human Rights Committee, the body of independent experts that monitors the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights by its states parties, gave a historical decision relating to climate change and migration in 2020. Let me quote from a newspaper dealing with the outcome of the hearing held by the committee. According to the newspaper, Ione Teitoita, a citizen of Kiribati, who has been seeking asylum in New Zealand for years, could have become the world's first climate refugee, but he couldn't. On January 24, the UN Human Rights Committee supported the New Zealand Supreme Court's refusal to accept his request, noting that Mr. Teitoita's situation did not represent an imminent danger or real attack on his fundamental rights. Still, there's a hope is coming. The committee also considered that people fleeing from the effects of climate change and natural disasters should not be returned to their country of origin, the principles of non-refoulement, if their fundamental human rights, this is right to life, were threatened. So, if a person flees from his country because of climate change, a person may not return to his or her country because of climate change, her country of origin, if she or he, if her or his fundamental, this is called right to life. This is a historical decision, but still there is a reservation, as you see. Who will investigate the concrete situation, tangible situation, and which test will be applied to determine whether there is a real risk and imminent danger to people's right to life? This is a matter of interpretation. The third thing that I would like to mention, what can we say under human rights perspective, namely right to a clean, healthful environment? Many states, for sure, have long been drafted and implemented in their national legislative system the rule provision that the right to a clean, healthful environment is fundamental to human dignity. However, until last year, right to a clean, healthful environment was not recognized as a human right on the global scale. Yes, maybe individual states may recognize this as a right, but in the global scale, not until last year we witnessed such a progressive event. Last year, the Human Rights Council of United Nations adopted a landmark resolution recognizing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right that is important for the enjoyment of human rights. Thus, the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment will be considered under the category of human rights, which ultimately be a grant for the enjoyment of all rights. Furthermore, the Council affirms that the promotion of the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment requires the full implementation of the multilateral environmental agreements under the principles of international environmental law. This is a concrete achievement, imposing obligations over states and bestowing rights to people. Putting aside these tangible achievements, the resolution adopted by the Council has a moral and legitimizing effects on the issue at hand. According to our previous article, we claimed that the impacts of climate change would have ultimately resulted in the erosion of state sovereignty. Why we say that? Because the adverse effects of climate change will eventually force states to adopt new regulations relating to it, no matter whether the states are satisfied or not. And now, as we have seen, new international regulations are being adopted, and hopefully soon these progressive developments will continue. And as for your question, Hocam, hopefully UN or any other international organization would be a base to create a legal framework for this hot topic, maybe not in this short period, but in the longer phase. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Burak Hocam, for this insightful presentation. The first three presentations, as a matter of fact, mainly focused on the linkage between the climate change and migration. Now we want to take a slightly different perspective of the migration issue. Now I want to give the floor to Dr. Franck Düvell, who is affiliated with the Institute of Migration Research and Intercultural Studies and teaches at Osnabruck University based in Germany. He will be presenting on a very topical subject entitled "How is Europe Dealing with the Humanitarian Crisis After the War in Ukraine?" That is, he will be speaking on the migration issue only. And the floor is yours, Dr. Düvell. Can you unmute, please?
All right, sorry, I thought you'd do it centrally. So yes, thanks for having me tonight, and hello everybody, good afternoon. It's indeed a bit of an awkward fit. The key sort of link I saw, apart from migration, maybe most people remember the Chernobyl disaster, forced displacement of 330,000 people, and many of whom are actually displaced again because of the war. I'm going to talk about three topics very briefly as an introduction about the war, then second, migration, and then third, integration, to have it more comprehensive. And also there are lots of parallels between another crisis affecting all of us, and that's the displacement in Syria. The war, unfortunately, was predictable, but nobody wanted to know. The EU was complacent, they were not prepared. It was a bit similar to 2015, when it was predictable that Syrians would move on to Europe, and nobody wanted to hear. The war we are facing at the moment actually started already in 2014 with the invasion of Donbass in eastern Ukraine. We then already had 2 million displaced people, IDPs, and others 500,000 going to Russia. Donbass was basically depopulated, like all other territories occupied by Russia, like parts of Georgia, part of Moldova. We have the same situation again. This time, the war affects 26 million people. This is more than 60% of the entire population of Ukraine. It particularly affects the east of Ukraine, which is the more densely populated part. It's the industrial part of the country. It's the economic powerhouse. You have the natural resources there. You have oil, gas, coal, and whatnot. You have most of the large cities in the east of Ukraine. And yeah, what I also like to say before coming to the main topic is that there is kind of a bit of misunderstanding of what Ukraine is and what Ukrainians are. Ukraine is a very diverse country, is a very diverse society. There are 130 recognized ethnic minorities. You have the Ukrainians and the Russians, of course, but there are Romanians, Bulgarians, Albanians, Slovaks, Poles, Belarusians, even Germans, Tatars, of course. It's also multi-religious, Greek, Ukrainian, Russian Orthodox, Protestant, Catholic, Muslims, and Jews. And people have been living together for decades, if not hundreds of years, quite peacefully, surprisingly peacefully, actually. Ukraine is one of the countries in Europe with the lowest level of anti-Semitism, for example, and that's quite remarkable. So far, by the war, 12 million people have been displaced. This is a third of the entire population. 5 million were displaced internationally. Over 7 million people were displaced internally. And it's indeed one of the largest and fastest processes of forced migration that we have seen in recent years. Displacement in Ukraine over 4 or 5 weeks is similar to displacement in Syria over 4 years. So that's what I mean when I say very, very fast. What I also like to emphasize, because we need to look at the drivers of forced migration, if we put together Syrian migration, partly caused by Russia, Ukrainian forced migration, partly caused by Russia, displacement in Moldova, Georgia, Chechnya, and other places, between 1/4 and 1/3 of all global forced migration is somehow related to Russian colonialism, imperialism, and warmongering as a driver. I think we need to recognize that, and we need to appreciate that more than it has so far been done. Now we have about 4.5 million Ukrainians in the EU, the refugees, 1.5 million already moving away from the countries bordering Ukraine to other countries. So they are moving from Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Moldova, and Romania to other countries, Austria, Germany, Italy, Greece, Spain. Basically any EU member state is now hosting Ukrainians. We already also see return migration. That's not much talked about, but up to 830,000 people already returned. But every day, 25,000-30,000 more people arrive in the EU. So it's a very dynamic process. It's a lot of toing and froing, which also means the process is very dynamic. People come and go. They don't necessarily stay for long. And that also means statistics are very unreliable, which is a bit of a reminder of some issues with statistics in Turkey since 2015. What we also need to recognize is that Ukrainians have been migrating within Europe for at least 30 years. There's, of course, a much longer history. They have been historically going to Russia on the one hand, to the EU and other Western countries on the other hand. The country is almost torn apart between East and West. It's been depleted by parts of his population due to migration. 7-8 million people the country lost. And I once suggested whether Ukraine is kind of the Mexico of Europe, because it is such a large provider of cheap labor. People in Ukraine also prior to the war had very high migration aspirations. At one point in 2010, almost 50% of the people wanted to migrate because of positive changes that had decreased to 25%. But because of migration, Ukraine is very well integrated with the European Union. We have over 2 million Ukrainians in the EU. There is a migration network. And this is an attraction for forced migrants. They have somewhere to go. They have family, friends, or they have been to some countries before. And so in order to explain migration, we need to recognize it's an immediate member state of the EU. So it's a bit similar to the relation between Syria and Turkey. And also in the case of Turkey, we often heard Syrians are brothers and sisters, and Ukrainians are brothers and sisters to Poles, Hungarians, and Romanians. There is a very strong historical, linguistic, cultural relationships and affinities. And for all these reasons, people could travel fairly easily, visa-free, no risk, no protection gap. The journeys were safe. You could, you could get from Ukraine to Poland within a couple of hours. From Ukraine to Warsaw, it's a 6 hours drive by car. To Berlin is maybe 9 hours, 10 hours, just to understand the proximity. And the EU, after some discussion, protected temporary protection that has been discussed in 2015, but it wasn't then implemented. It's very similar to temporary protection that Turkey provides to Syrians from 2014. People are not dispersed by state order. They are free to move where they want to go. And as a result, we now have a legal patchwork in Europe. We have asylum, we have temporary protection, we have subsidiary protection. And that's something to be addressed. In terms of the integration matter, it's a bit too early to say, because it all started only 6 weeks ago. People come and go. They don't know yet whether they are going to stay, for how long they are going to stay. People return in large numbers. People move on to other countries in large numbers. And we have 85% women. We have many children. And that means that we deal with separated families. The men are staying behind because of the general mobilization. They are restricted from leaving the country. So it's a very specific situation. Also a bit similar from the experience of Syrians in Turkey, where very often we saw entire families moving, wife, husband, children, parents, uncles, and so on. Here we have divided families. The Ukrainians we see in Europe today are very highly educated. 73% have either a university degree or high school diplomas. They had a very high level of economic activity, working or self-employment back in Ukraine, 86%. At the moment, only 52% say they want to work. Well, why is that? Mostly because most people think that they hopefully would be able to return very soon. And second, because it's the mothers with their children. Sorry. And maybe I should stop here so that we have still enough time for questions. Sorry for my...
That's fine. Thank you very much, Dr. Franck Düvell. I have a short question to you, if you don't mind. How do you think the Ukrainian refugee crisis will unfold? And as a continuation of this one, it seems that it will be a prolonged war, the Ukrainian-Russian war. How this refugee crisis will affect the other refugees which are already in Europe, that is Asians, Africans, and Middle Easterners. So this will be an additional burden for the European countries. So this is obvious. It will be an additional burden. So how this Ukrainian refugee crisis will affect the other refugees in Europe?
So I'm just working on a post-war scenarios, post-war migration scenarios. There are very extreme scenarios on either end, but I would assume that the sort of hottest part of the war would hopefully come to an end in a couple of weeks' time, ending with occupation of another part of Ukraine, affecting 7 or 8 million people. Of these, some several million would be IDPs within the country, some several million would move on to the EU. In terms of numbers, I wouldn't expect that much of a change of what we have now. Maybe 1/3 of the people can return, others would stay in Europe and in other parts of Ukraine. In terms of the impact on EU and other refugees, we have had a bit of an emotional debate over issues of unequal treatment, which is the case in a way. Queries for racism, discrimination of other refugees. I'm personally not so pessimistic, to be honest. On the one hand, the European economy at the moment is fairly stable. We have economic growth across all member states. We have millions and millions of job vacancies across all member states. We have a fairly stable fiscal situation in all member states. We have aging and even shrinking populations in all member states. I do not see that there is any lack of space, resources, housing, jobs, social services whatsoever to accommodate a few million Ukrainians. I have said exactly the same about the Syrians. I said exactly the same. They were no burden, adding even less than 1% to the EU population. Europe could have accepted easily more Syrians, but then they didn't. What I find very interesting, and I don't know whether it's a trend or is a one-off, a couple of days ago in Berlin, we had a joint demonstration of Syrians, Ukrainians, and Georgians against war, for peace, highlighting the key commonality, and that is that they are all victims of Russian aggression and warfaring. So there is something interesting going on in terms of building bridges and commonalities. And that's certainly something that we can build upon and develop.
Thank you very much. Now I want to turn to Mr. Irudaya. He has focused on a very specific issue, the Kerala region in India. The world politics, unfortunately, began to experience more and more realpolitik and increasing, intensifying great power rivalry. This will probably undermine some of the issues regarding the planet, such as the environmental security, the climate change, even the new issue areas of international relations disciplines, such as migration. But looking from an academic perspective, we clearly understand and we recognize all these issues as part of the high politics. So to you, how will states such as India and many others will try to keep a balance between these traditional, conventional high politics issues and these newly emerged issues such as climate change and migration. So what do we expect from these states, those states, to follow?
No, I think you have raised a very important question. But I would like to reiterate that one thing is that we do not have a real good data on mobility within the country and outside. Like I just heard from Franck talking about millions of replacement from Russia to both internal displacement and international refugees. But we don't have much data. Even within the country, how many people are moving? I think all countries, data on migration is very weak. That's what the Global Compact on Migration clearly says. Invest to collect data on migration to produce evidence-based policy. I don't think many countries, I don't think any country investing money or resources to collect data on migration of different types, which includes climate change or what we are talking about, Russia-Ukraine crisis. So we are not putting any money to collect data. Now, whatever we are hearing is some type of number floating by people or researchers based on existing some type of manipulative data. We don't have real data. I think once you do that, probably, I think things will be settled. The second point, along with that, I also want to ask people, because what is happening in country like India is that migration is going to be there. You like it or not, migration will continue, partly because migration is the only component in the world, not fertility, not mortality. These are the three demographic variables changing the demographic growth in any population: birth, death, and migration. Now, birth and deaths are come to almost standstill, almost very low in many populations, many societies, including Europe. Migration is the one which is going to be dynamic. So you like it or not, of course, the politician will play their own role, creating tension between communities, tension between issues, tension between states. It all will continue. But migration is going to continue, and we have to provide them equal justice, equal remuneration, equal opportunities, so that they what is called live and let live in the emerging scenario.
Thank you very much. We have just received a question directed to Franck Düvell. Lorenzo Bordonaro asking the question: could actually this new refugee crisis prompt on European common response to this wave, or should we expect another piecemeal response from the one of 2015? So what is your say on this?
Yes and no, because we have a common response to the forced migration of Ukrainians. The EU very quickly agreed a common legal approach, temporary protection, not to implement any dispersal scheme, but a laissez-faire approach, which is very, very unusual for the EU, which very often likes a more top-down approach by the state. And on the other hand, it remains piecemeal with respect to other forced migrations across the central Mediterranean, eastern Mediterranean, from Syria, of Afghans and others. And I'm very pessimistic in terms of seeing some improvement here. The sort of hostile approach towards refugees from other parts of the world is very strong in some member states and some parts of the populations, and that's not going to go away, I'm afraid.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Franck. Now we have another question directed to Burak, Güneş. Burak hocam, it seems that today unilateral policies and violations of political independence and territorial integrity of many states clearly undermines, the rule of law at the global level. It undermines, unfortunately, international order, international regimes, the principles of international law, and the topic that we deal with, that you deal with, requires a joint action at the global level. That is, it requires the development of new principles, new rules and norms. That is, we have been facing a paradoxical development. So how do you see the future of preparing and imposing legal frameworks at the international level?
Okay, thank you, Rajan. I think there is a dichotomy between sovereignty and justice. And this dichotomy cannot be solved easily. There is a tension between sovereignty and justice. And this is a shift. States may sometimes, apply to sovereign rights and can build their arguments from their sovereign rights, will, and behaviors, or in other times they may build their arguments descending from human rights or moral issues or justice. And this is the tension, and this is a shift comes from sovereignty to justice, an enduring shift. So if this is the point, there should be a problem, and the problem, as I see, is the sovereignty itself. Because if we put the sovereignty at the high, and if we deem sovereignty as the leading principles of international state system, there will be little chance for states to cooperate. Let me briefly explain what I'm trying to say. When we look at the United Nations Charter, we see that all the states are equal and sovereign. But in the same article, let me read it. It's open. It is now open in my Article 2.1. The organization is based on the principles of the sovereign equality of all states, all its members. This is good. But when we look at the Article 2.7, nothing contained in the present charter shall authorize the United Nations to intervene in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdictions of any state, or shall require the members to submit such matters to settlement under the present charter. So the non-intervention is the base of the system. It is called like that. But at the same article, United Nations Charter puts the opposites. So this is a dichotomy. This paralyzes the system itself. I'm not pretty sure how we can solve this problem, but I think the problem is there is no higher authority above sovereignty. Every state deems themselves as sovereign. So every state says that this is true, and the other says that this is true. And this is a dichotomy and tension between sovereignty and justice. One more example let me give. As you know, the very structure of the United Nations Security Council, the 5 members of 15 members are permanent members, and they have veto power. But let's talk about Article 27. Article 27, the voting procedure, it says that each member of the Security Council shall have 1 vote. The Article 27, paragraph 2 says that decisions of the Security Council on procedural matters shall be made by an affirmative vote of 9 members. Decisions of the Security Council on all other matters shall be made by an affirmative voice of 9 members, including the concurring voice of the permanent members. This is the veto power. So when the dispute or the subject or the matters which naturally can be determined as procedure, the permanent members may put this into void and determine it as not procedure. Can determine it as all other matters. So if they can do this, they violate the law by themselves. So the problem is inherent, and the problem, I think, caused by the sovereignty itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. This is all the questions that we have. And thank you very much, gentlemen. And I want to ask you if you have any last remark to make, before closing the session. Let me start with Mr. Irudaya. Do you have any last remark to make?
I just want to make that we should invest in collecting data on migration. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Franck Düvell?
Yes, I perfectly agree with the need for more research in terms of in times of crisis. We are not very well prepared. We often do post hoc research, and when it's most needed, then we are observers and don't know much more than the media. And we need a better sort of research, ad hoc research in times of crisis, and we need a much better communication channel between research and policy in order to be better prepared for when the crisis arrives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Haydar, Karaman hocam?
I just would like to add a point, an issue that the planned resettlement policies will play a primary role in the future, and it is really important to make the migration secure. We can see this issue at the Haiti case or other state as well as Ukrainian case. That's why we have to start to discuss about the urbanization of the urbanization and immigration policy together. I just would like to add this point.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Burak, Güneş?
Hocam, thank you for inviting me, and I'm really happy to meet with all distinguished speakers. Thank you for this event.
Thank you very much. I again thank you all the presenters. As we see, both the climate change and migration are two interesting phenomena, and unfortunately, which leads the world to deeper crisis. Besides the high political issues on the agenda, considering today's Russian-Ukrainian war, the global rivalry between the United States and China, etc., world politicians and state leaders, they began, unfortunately, to undermine all these critical issues, which will determine the future of the whole planet, not one or two states. So we hope, we expect that one day all these crises will be over, and the politicians, bureaucrats, world leaders will turn to the implementation of the Paris Climate Convention and all other conventions, the previous one. So we hope for a peaceful, a healthy, and a sustainable planet. Thank you very much for watching this panel organized by the journal Inside Turkey. See you till our next panel. Thank you very much again to all of you.